Hello and welcome back to the show. So, I've been having some problems with the backhoe, and I know I was a little tentative about putting out this video because I know everyone's going to want the bucket on a rope. So, to help you guys out, for a limited time only, send me some message, and for the low price of $9.95, I will get you a bucket on a rope. So, the bucket on the rope here is actually right underneath a hole in the extendahoe. So basically, all the fluid that's leaking out of the extendahoe hydraulic cylinder is coming out of a hole and going into the bucket instead of all into the ground. So I decided to take this guy apart to fix those hydraulics, and I figured that while I was off, I'd also put on a manual thumb such that I can get a little better grip and articulation on the bucket. So you drive out the first pin on the bucket there. There's only two pins holding on the bucket. One's a hook and one's a pin. So drive out that pin with a suitable drift that I'm showing there. And then you kind of got to wiggle, the mechanism off where you're curling out, dipping in and booming up to get the bucket off of the dipper. So you can see that here, and I extended the extendahoe all the way out because I figured this was going to be my, this is kind of how it describes to do this in the manual. So you need some lock ring pliers, and as you can see here, I have some regular lock ring pliers and I have some heavy duty ones. And I gotta say, the heavy duty ones are absolutely needed because the lock rings are so big that they don't work with regular lock ring pliers. So you need to have, they have to be really strong, and they also have to extend it extra far. So if you see here, I'm starting to drive out this cylinder, but before you do that, you're supposed to chalk up the cylinder here so that it doesn't fall and smash you or something else. Drive out that first pin, and then I took out the links that connected the extendahoe to the hydraulics for the bucket. So yeah, I tried to leave those on and ended up just not really working out. So using your suitable drift, you can drive out that main pin, and when you do so, be careful because basically metal kind of parts go flying all over the place and may hit your new $9.95 bucket and spray your oil everywhere. This is kind of an interesting detail. The manual does not describe that you have to remove these hoses. So for a step-by-step procedure, it's kind of an interesting oversight because if you follow the procedure in the manual, you will rip these hoses in half because these need to come off before you take off the extendahoe. I gotta say, these things, I don't know if it's just because they've been on there so long or because someone actually made them so tight, but these things were ridiculously tight. I had a kid like holding onto this wrench like a foot out, and I'm like tearing on this other wrench, and we were both pulling on this thing so hard that when it broke free, we both thought that we broke something, but it was just because it made such a large sound when it snapped free. So once you pull out the pin that's holding in the hydraulics, there's nothing holding on this this part anymore, and this is kind of where it gets a little dicey. This part is about 450 pounds, so you got to be really careful about where it's going to go. It's probably want to slide off, and in my case, mine did start sliding off, but it didn't slide completely off, and I managed to catch it under the bucket for my tractor. So in retrospect, later on, I put it on differently because I didn't really like the way that this was working out. But you need to catch this thing or put this thing onto something. My recommendation is that you back it up to an engine hoist, and you release this entire section onto an engine hoist so that it can hold it up while you're moving the backhoe around or pulling the engine hoist back and backing it off of the inner extendahoe section. Once the outer extendahoe is off, you can pull the pin on the inner pin that's holding in the hydraulics and pull the hydraulics out the end of the extendahoe. In this case, I wasn't really sure where I was leaking from, and after I had tried to get someone to fix this thing, I was getting kind of the runaround, so I decided to just fix this thing myself. And I gotta say, if you're gonna take this hydraulic piston out, then I think you gotta be crazy to not just go the extra distance and just fix the hydraulics, because honestly, getting this hydraulic piston out was like 95% of the work. Replacing the seals on inside this piston took like, I don't know, less than an hour, and I think there's like 9 seals inside there, seals and spacers and different stuff. But it's not complicated. There may be a couple things that make it a little harder to do, but effectively, you've already done all the hard work. So I connected it back up to the hydraulics to see if I could see exactly where it was leaking from. I was pretty sure it was leaking from the end, because it looked like the end cap was coming off a little bit, and that drew my attention, and it absolutely was pouring out of this end cap. So there's supposed to be a screw in here, and apparently my screw is missing or fell out or something, and this thing, over a very long period of time, the end cap started unscrewing itself and blew out a seal. You need a couple special tools in order to do this, but more importantly, you need something fixed, a fixed point, so that you can grab onto the hydraulics and apply a lot of pressure onto some things like stuck. There's some giant bolts inside the hydraulics that might get stuck. So in my case, I didn't have anything that was large and immobile except for my truck. So I connected a giant metal spike to the plow rig on the truck and connected the hydraulics to it just on the eyelet. So the tool you need here is a hydraulic gland nut wrench. Usually, if the pins go into the end of the gland nut, and there's a separate tool that's less commonly used, but you might see sometimes, where the holes go in radially into the gland nut, in which case you need a gland nut spanner style wrench. So yeah, so this is pretty easy to use. Mine, I got a couple of them. I think I got 2 for like $40 on eBay. You hook this thing up to a 3/4 inch breaker bar, and sometimes they're easier to take off and sometimes they're harder to take off. But there's supposed to be a screw holding in that nut, so make sure find the screw or a roll pin or whatever it is, get that thing out. Once that's out, you can just take this thing right off. Some are harder than others, but I gotta say, I bought specifically for this job, because I didn't have one, a 3/4 inch breaker bar, and then I also bought a 6-foot pipe, because I was having some problems taking the nut off of the piston. So once the gland nut is off, you can slide the piston out. So the piston has a large nut on the end of it, and I actually bought some special, I tried to use my impact hammer, and I got some oversized hose to make sure I was getting enough air to the hammer, and I was pounding on this thing. It would not come off. And for as much time as I spent trying to get this thing off with an air wrench, I was able to get it off just mainly by hand, by using the 3/4 inch drive, and a hardened socket and a giant bar. I think it was like a 6-foot bar that I had attached to this thing, but I didn't even need the entire length of the bar in order to get this nut off. So yeah, it was tight. I've seen people take it off really easily. Mine was really hard. Once that giant bolt on the end of the hydraulics is off, replacing these seals is a snap. You can literally do it in like 10 minutes. I threw this thing back together. It went back together in a snap. Put the special screw in to hold the gland nut on, and went to go push this thing back into the extendahoe. Now this was a little more complicated, because it's kind of heavy. You're attached to the hoses, so you're gonna kind of lead the hoses up through the extendahoe. I ended up tying a rope onto them and like kind of taping them all together with duct tape to pull the hoses up into the extendahoe first, because you got to make sure that they're all in there and that they don't bind. And there's a very small hole in the top of the extendahoe that they have to come out of, so you got to be a little tricky with that. So I ended up doing it myself. I was using a strap on one side to pull the piston up through, and then I was using a ratchet strap to hold the piston so that it wouldn't come flying back out every time I stopped to take a break or line something up. So I took the opportunity while the extendahoe was off, in order to get some of the grease out, to put on this manual thumb. I do have another video, which I'll link, that I just talk about it a little bit, although I don't go into the whole process of how I wrestled this thing around on the engine hoist to weld this thing up. But I did get that on at the same time, and everything actually came out great. I'll see you next time.